Hello, everyone. We will get started in just about 30 seconds. We're going to let everyone get on and have a chance to make sure their audio is set up. As we're waiting, if you can go ahead and use the chat function to introduce yourself and the organization that you work for, it's a good opportunity to network. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We're going to get started in just about 10 seconds. Great. I see some people popping in the chat here. Okay, we are going to get started. Good afternoon and welcome to the Indiana Youth Institute's webinar for July, Updates on Youth Issues from the Legislative Session. My name is Joshua Long. I'm the Senior Educational Content Manager here at the Indiana Youth Institute. Thank you so much for joining today's presentation. We are grateful to have the chance to connect as a community of Indiana youth workers who remain committed to meeting the needs of our youth and children. Oops, I'm too fast. For those who are not familiar with IYI, our mission is to improve the lives of Indiana children by strengthening and connecting the people, organizations, and communities that are focused on kids and youth. Listed here, you can see our vision that drives the work we do for Indiana and youth. Before we begin, I'm just going to share a few pointers that will help you engage with today's webinar. For any technical support issues, use the chat feature to send a message, and Aaron Whitcomb, IYI's registration manager, is behind the scenes to assist you. Use this feature to converse with the group as well. You will be able to access the PowerPoint from today's slide when we email it out to you after the webinar. We also encourage you to ask questions, so please use the Q&A feature for any you may have, and we will get to as many as possible. And you're able to upvote questions that other folks asked that you are interested in as well. Later today, you will receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation of this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know your thoughts on today's presentation. If you don't receive the evaluation email, check your junk email as it may have been directed there. Once you complete the evaluation, you will be redirected to your certificate of participation. Like all of today's webinar will be posted on our website if you'd like to revisit a portion later or share the opportunity to listen in with partners. And so with that, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker for today's webinar, Sarah Comfer from the Marion County Commission on Youth. Sarah.
Hi, Josh. Thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank you to everybody for attending. I'll go ahead and get started and share my screen. Alrighty. So yes, my name is Sarah Comfer. I'm the Public Policy and Advocacy Director at McCoy, also known as Marion County Commission on Youth. You have my contact information here on the screen. Please don't hesitate to reach out any follow-up questions, or if you think of any opportunities or we can collaborate for advocacy-related issues. I would love to work with you. I'm so excited to see a group of individuals from all over the state, so I'm always trying to expand my network, and excited to be able to speak with you today. First and foremost, I just want to kind of kick things off. I'm going to be going over all of the 2024 legislative session, a lot of the bills that impacted children and families that passed through the State House this year. I will say that any views expressed are those of my own and those of McCoy. They don't necessarily reflect those views of IYI. So, if you hear kind of maybe McCoy's position on a particular bill or a concern that we had or something like that, I just kind of wanted to preface with that. I also intentionally chose to just highlight the bills that actually passed. Every year, there are hundreds and hundreds of bills that are introduced. And many, many, many of those impact children and families and people who serve children and families. But unfortunately, only a small number actually get through the full legislative process. So I'll show you kind of some of those final numbers in just a minute here. And I still have plenty to talk about, trust me. But I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew that I'm not covering every single bill that was introduced that impacts children and families, because there's just not enough time in the day or the week or the month or the year to go over all of those. But I am going to go over the ones that have passed and kind of what we can expect kind of moving forward. So let's go ahead and get started. So just a quick recap, Indiana's legislative session this year in 2024, it raced by. It was considered a short session. Short sessions occur every other year on even numbered years. So we kicked things off on Monday, January 8th, halftime when all the Senate bills switch over to the House bills switch over to the Senate. That happened in early February, February 7th. And then sine die, which is the day of adjournment. That happened actually a week early this year on Friday, March 8th. So it really went by quickly. And, you know, short years are always interesting just to see how much can be squeezed into such a short amount of time. Additionally, there were certain regulations put on lawmakers too, that they had a limit of, I believe, they could only introduce maybe 5 bills or something like that this year. So that kind of caused some interesting changes where a lot of bills had a lot of multiple issues included in their respective bills and things like that to be able to fill as much as they could into the short session and the presentation. But let's just keep moving. So with the final numbers, I just got this information. I thought it was really interesting just to see how many bills were actually introduced versus passed. These are introduced in like bills that cover really any issue. So in the House, there are 443 bills introduced. In the Senate, just shy of 300 bills were introduced. Just over 100 bills passed those first chambers. And then just fewer than that passed both chambers. And so the House, there was a pass rate of 21%. So 21% of the bills that were actually introduced passed all the way through and made it to Governor Holcomb's desk. Similarly, in the Senate, there was a slightly higher rate of 26% that passed through the legislative session, passed through both chambers and made it to the governor's desk to sign into law. Most new laws went into effect just 16 days ago on July 1st, 2024. Unless otherwise noted, basically most bills go into effect that following July 1st. So a lot of these bills, especially the ones that are impacting schools that I'm going to be talking about, those will really go into effect for this upcoming school year, again, unless otherwise noted. So let's just go ahead and kick things off. Education tends to be one of the biggest issues that lawmakers really want to tackle every year. And so we had, you know, a very, probably arguably the biggest education bill that went through, and arguably the biggest bill that went through this past year was Senate Bill 1, titled Reading Skills. This is one that many of you are probably already familiar with, but this was introduced as a way to address Indiana's poor literacy rates amongst kids. There were too many kids that were passing 3rd grade without being able to meet certain reading requirements. And so because of that, lawmakers introduced Senate Bill 1, which saw a lot of action this year. This bill has been kind of renamed the Every Child Learns to Read Education Bill. The authors stated that the bill aims to ensure that Hoosier children or Hoosier students are prepared for a successful future through the process of identifying those who need more help and retaining those who need more preparation. It's the retention part that proved to be quite controversial this year with advocates. There were a lot of advocates who were concerned that bringing kids back will have negative effects on their social emotional development, with their relationships with their peers and things like that. But a good thing that, you know, we were excited about to see is that there was a lot more investment put in to identifying students at an early age to be able to provide additional support to them so that they're not reaching 3rd grade without having had a lot of opportunities to be able to continue working on their reading skills. So with that said, schools now, with this bill, schools will offer instruction that closely aligns with the science of reading curriculum from kindergarten through 8th grade. Science of reading is something that we saw quite a bit of in 2023. So that kind of expands on that. In 2nd grade, students will take the IRead assessment and will take the IREAD assessment, and passing students will be exempted from having to take it again. Students who did not pass the assessment would have a specialized support in third grade surrounding reading instruction. If the student does not pass the exam in third grade, the bill will then require students to be held back. Under the law, it also requires schools to provide summer school courses and individualized tutoring tutoring to students who are struggling to read. There are exemptions that are made for students with learning disabilities, students learning English as a second language, etc. So some exemptions are made. Parents are also notified. There's a notification process if their child is not on track or is at risk of failing the IREAD assessment. Parents also have the opportunity to appeal the process and appeal to the school if their child is at risk of being retained. A big concern for people who were advocating for some changes in this bill was that children in poverty are the students that are most at risk of retention. In fact, students from low-income families made up nearly 3/4 of the over 13,000 students who didn't pass the IREAD in 2023. They also made up roughly 300 of the 400 total students who were actually retained in third grade that year. There are all sorts of other reasons why this could be. Children who are experiencing poverty may have issues with transportation to school, with access to healthy food, reliable food, access to shelter. They may be moving schools or moving from home to home more frequently. And all of that can impact a student's academic success. So that's something that a lot of advocates were quite concerned about. We do know that there are some wonderful organizations, many of which may be here today, who are working to help address this. In particular, a lot of out-of-school time organizations are working to provide additional resources over the summer to be able to support children with reading. I was just reading earlier this week, United Way and the Mind Trust have a project known as Summer Learning Labs that are open to all and expanding beyond. Currently, I think they're only available in Marion County, but they're going to be expanding. And they're targeting students in neighborhoods where families live above the federal poverty threshold, but can't afford all their household needs, like childcare and rent. We are, optimistic that other provisions of these laws, like the earlier identification, intervention, summer school, will make a positive impact on students' reading skills long before third grade. So we're certainly optimistic about those added pieces.
Hey, Sarah, can I ask a question that was asked really quick?
Yes, absolutely.
Brittany asked, I thought I read originally that the funding for summer school programs has not quite been figured out for this requirement. Have you seen any updates on the funding?
Yes, that was actually, I was just about to say that. So great question, Brittany. Thank you. So yes, the law mandates summer literacy instruction for students who it mandates that there should be summer literacy instruction for students. It's not currently clear how much funding will be available for those programs until the next biennial budget is passed in 2025. So that's something that we're going to be paying close attention to this year in the 2025 legislative session, which kicks off in January. That is when we're going to be discussing the budget. The current state budget for summer school doesn't fully cover those summer school costs. So that's definitely going to be something that's going to be addressed this upcoming year. So, because that's a big concern. I have some data that in 2023, there were 309 Indiana schools that requested and received $18.3 million in reimbursements from the state summer school fund. That amount was 65% of the school's $28 million in actual costs for summer school. So currently there just isn't enough money to cover the needs of existing summer school, let alone this expansion of summer school. There's also a question, meals and transportation are not eligible for reimbursement. So we'll need to figure out a way to cover that part of the budget too. Because ultimately, if lawmakers don't appropriate enough money to cover these costs, schools then would have to fund the rest through other means. So that's something that I think we all need to be paying close attention to, and making sure that we reach out to our legislators to make sure that they support adding additional funds to support the summer school expansion and needs of these students. Senate Bill 6 was also introduced and passed into public law. This was sort of a companion piece of legislation to Senate Bill 1. This is really just a bill that identifies the older students that have passed beyond third grade, to identify them if they are not meeting their reading proficiency requirements, to identify them and provide them with extra support too. So I'll just keep moving along. That's definitely the biggest one that probably is going to take the most time of my explanation today. So Senate Bill 282 is a bill called absenteeism and school attendance. It passed into law, Public Law 125. This was lawmakers' attempt to address chronic absenteeism, which is a big concern of many, especially in this kind of post-COVID era. A lot of students, during COVID obviously had attendance issues because of hybrid learning situations and whatnot, but we've realized that this chronic absenteeism has persisted since we've been sending kids back to school kind of full time. So this will require students that are reported to be habitually truant, which means 10 days or more of unexcused absences within a school year. It's not that much, honestly, 10 days of unexcused absences. They need to be reported to the prosecutor's office, and this could involve taking legal action against the student's parents. It also requires schools to meet with parents of chronically absent students or students who miss 5 days of school within a 10-week period without a qualifying excuse. Those kids are in grades K through 6, and they must establish a plan to improve the student's attendance. I can speak on behalf of McCoy. We certainly support any additional interventions to make sure that students' attendance is addressed, because we want to make sure that kids are showing up at school. Our concern at McCoy was the notification of prosecuting attorneys. We don't know that it's necessarily beneficial to open up a young person to, a legal process for missing school, because there are so many other underlying reasons why a young person might be missing school. It could be that they're being bullied. It could be that they don't have transportation. It could be that their parent is working multiple jobs, during the day or something like that. There could be a whole host of reasons. And so that's something that we want to make sure that lawmakers are mindful of. With that said, they are planning on continuing discussions of this. In particular, there is a summer study committee. The Summer Study Committee on Education has been assigned to study under A, steps that can be taken to improve school attendance and educational outcomes for students, and the impact of absenteeism on school funding distribution. So this is something that, I can say that McCoy, we and other advocates worked with Stacey Donato, who's the author of this particular bill. She seems very inclined to want to work with school attendance experts to find kind of the best ways to address chronic absenteeism. So I don't believe that the Summer Study Committee has been scheduled quite yet. We're looking at probably the end of summer, if not even early fall. A lot of times that happens. Summer study committees are more like fall study committees. But that's something that we and other advocates are looking to hopefully be able to speak up and share some best practices to address chronic absenteeism.
Hey, Sarah, quick question for you.
Yeah.
Do you have stats on how many low-income families SB 282 would affect? That's from Lori.
On how many this one would affect? I don't have that information off the top, like in front of me right now. But I can say, well, like in 2023, there were 400 total students who were retained in third grade. That, of course, was before this bill was passed, so that number could go up. I unfortunately don't have that number in front of me, but that's something I can certainly look into and follow up with you on. So sorry about that. All right. I'll go through just a few other kind of smaller, I guess, education-related ones. I do recognize that this video that's showing for this particular slide is probably from circa 2005, 2006, based on the style of kids' clothes, the kind of phones that they're using. I see some Blackberries in there. But there was a bill, Senate Bill 185, that was introduced and passed that addresses a student's use of wireless communication devices or cell phones in schools. This will require school corporations and charter schools to adopt and implement a policy that governs a student's use of wireless communication devices, prohibiting them from using a device during instructional times. This includes not only cell phones, but also things like smartwatches, iPads, things like that. But they are able to use it if approved by a teacher for educational purposes. Students will be able to use their devices in emergency situations, and really it's up to each school corporation and charter school to kind of come up with that policy themselves and then post it on their website. This was another one that was introduced and passed as Release for Religious Instruction. Students are now going to be permitted to leave school for up to 2 hours per week, so long as they have parental notice, for religious instruction. Previously, school had the option to allow this, but now they will be required to excuse the student. A little bit more about this is schools and local churches can collaborate to find the best time for children to leave the school day, ideally when a core subject is not being taught. So a lot of schools are thinking about perhaps maybe sending kids for this kind of instructional time during recess, library time, or lunch, or something like that. I did want to do a little bit dive a little deeper into this, and I was reading kind of the contents of the bills, specifically what do we mean by religious instruction, because a lot of the explanations refer to churches a lot, so which makes me think that, you know, they're really only thinking about Christian instruction. I did look in the contents of the bill. It reads that the instruction should be conducted by a church, an association of churches, or an association that is organized for religious instruction and incorporated under Indiana law. So I think it's probably that last part that it probably may allow for inclusivity of other religions and things like that. So, so this is one that may be popping up if you are working in a particular school, is that there may be more students who will be released for this sort of instructional time. I believe it was introduced because there were a lot of parents who struggle with, you know, on the weekends, their kid might be very busy with extracurricular activities, preventing them from actually going to church or Sunday school or any other kind of religious-based educational opportunity. And so this was a way to be able to kind of work with schools to be able to provide that supplementary time. Obviously, a lot of opponents of this bill are concerned about, you know, the separation of church and state. I believe that, you know, this instruction needs to be taken out of the classroom, out of the school, to be able to, you know, be provided to students to kind of be mindful of that. And then also there's a lot of concerns too from opponents of this bill is like that, you know, they might be taken out during a time when they would be otherwise learning to read, for example, or learning some other kind of core subject matters. So that's certainly a concern that a lot of people had about this. So this is one that we're definitely going to want to pay attention to and kind of see what the effects are, and maybe how many kids actually take up the opportunity to be dismissed from class for this. 1243 is kind of it was a big bill that kind of encompassed a lot of different things, but it passed into Public Law 150, This will change some graduation requirements to include that now computer science needs to be a class that's taken for students to graduate high school. The class of 2029 will be the first that has to complete this requirement. And it must include instruction in algorithms and programming, computing systems, data and analysis, impacts of computing and networks, and the internet. Additionally, this bill also will impact the distribution of alternate diplomas or alternative diplomas. This will let more students with disabilities graduate high school. The change will mostly affect school districts that are that have really small schools because having those kind of diplomas will impact, you know, the number of graduates that they say that they can have. It's my understanding too that there is also currently a process going on addressing other requirements like graduation requirements. And I was trying to find out if this bill was directly related to that. I believe it probably is because it has a similar amount of, you know, in terms of like the class of 2029 being the first to experience these new requirements. So that's something that we definitely want to be paying attention to as more changes are made to graduation requirements for high schoolers in Indiana. Next up, childcare. This is always an issue. I mean, every year, childcare is kind of a huge topic that there's no clear answer in terms of how to provide more access to affordable, high-quality childcare in Indiana. But we're taking steps. Our legislature is taking steps. So we've got two bills that I kind of wanted to highlight is House Bill 1102, childcare, and then also Senate Bill 2, also named childcare. House Bill 1102, that increases the number of children under 12 months of age that may be provided care in a childcare home. This increases the maximum number of unrelated children allowed in an unlicensed home from 5 to 7. It also increases the time between license renewals for other child care centers from 2 years to 3 years. So it kind of loosens some of those licensing requirements. Programs operating out of a private or public school would also be exempt from licensure so long as they comply with health and safety regulations. So this is a way that lawmakers kind of want to break down some barriers to having access to child care facilities. There's, of course, understandable concern that by exempting certain licensure requirements that it may, you know, impact the safety of a child in a particular child care setting or something like that. I think a lot of lawmakers express concern of that, but they definitely want to make sure that these daycare centers are still complying with health and safety regulations. It also provides that certain child care providers are eligible for child care voucher payments. This also we're seeing similarly in Senate Bill 2, is it makes child care workers eligible for the On My Way pre-K program and child care development fund vouchers. They make up to 85% of the state's median income. This, I think, is just a way to get more individuals into the field of work of childcare. You know, a huge reason why childcare is so expensive is because not enough people are willing to work in those positions because of, you know, a whole host of reasons, but including pay and all of those things. But this is kind of an incentive to get more people into this field of work to, you know, be able to afford childcare for themselves. It also, Senate Bill 2 also lowers the minimum age to be a child care worker from 21 to 18. So again, that just expands who can serve as a child care worker, and we'll expand that to 18-year-olds and up. Youth employment. There are a few different bills that are going to impact youth employment that move their way through this year. One in particular is House Bill 1093, Employment of Minors, now as Public Law 138. This one repealed a lot of child labor laws that protect children from working later hours or longer shifts, particularly on school nights. I believe before, child labor laws would restrict a child under the age of 16, I think, from working past 7 p.m. or something like that. And now this will expand it so that they can work as late as like 10 p.m. The concern obviously is, during on school nights, if they're up too late, will they have enough time to do homework, to get enough sleep, and things like that. It will provide exemptions from certain hour and time restrictions for the employment of minors. This is between 14 and 16. And minors aged 16 to 18 working in agriculture are exempted from hazardous occupation rules. I believe that kind of final bullet point was something that was brought on a lot from the kind of more rural communities in particular. I believe there were even like Amish people coming, to the State House to kind of share their stories about how they have, young people within their communities who are working, in more agricultural type settings where they need that extra help. So,
Sarah, can I ask a couple of questions that came up on
sure,
this?
yeah.
The first is, when does the age requirement change?
I believe the age requirement, I don't think it was notified that it would, be anything different. So we can just assume it's went into effect on July 1st.
Cool.
So,
And then, do you have the hours? I think that's referring to the shift hours and later hours.
yeah, well, I don't have them in front of me. I'm kind of guessing from what I can remember from this past winter time. I believe it expanded it from like before they had a limitation of like they couldn't work beyond 7 p.m. Now they can work up to like 10 p.m. or something like that. In terms of how many hours per week, that information, unfortunately, I don't know. But
Okay.
that's something, yeah, I can definitely
And
look
then
up.
one more, what are the hazardous occupation rules? And then what are the exemptions? And then if you don't know that, is there some place that they can find it?
Yeah, that unfortunately I don't know either. I would have to, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of different news sources that have covered this particular bill. So if you type in, House Bill 1093, find a reputable news source that can kind of explain a little bit more about that. Additionally, I would also consider reaching out to perhaps the Indiana Institute for Working Families. They're a fantastic resource for any sort of like employment, labor type practice bills. And so they certainly will probably be more knowledgeable about that. But yeah, it's my understanding that for the hazardous occupation rules, it's gonna kind of be more relevant for things like heavy machinery, like farming machinery, things like that. But I would definitely consider reaching out probably to the Indiana Institute for Working Families, and they can hopefully explain it a little bit better. So
Great, thank you.
apologies.
That's it for now.
Okay, thanks. Youth employment, I also included alcoholic beverage sales because it kind of goes similarly to Senate Bill 146. Now, as of July 1st, Hoosiers 18 years of age and older will be able to serve alcohol in their place of employment. Before, it was 21 years and up, and now it's expanded. So if you're 18 years and up, you can serve alcohol. You can also ring up a sale of alcohol as an 18-year-old. And servers who are at least 18 years of age are also able to serve alcohol so long as they complete an alcohol server training program. So this obviously impacts older youth. I guess technically they're adults, but we, at least at McCoy, we consider youth to go up to age 26 in terms of like emerging adults. So this just expands who can serve alcohol and at what age. With that said, 1086, alcoholic beverage sales, this is Indiana's new happy hour law that passed and has gone into effect, on July 1st. This allows a bar or restaurant to sell alcohol for carryout. It also allows a bar or restaurant to increase or decrease the price of alcohol during a period of the day, aka happy hour. Apparently, I didn't realize this, but in Indiana, happy hour has not been legal since the mid 80s. So anytime you see sort of like special drink deals or whatever, up until now, it's been, like on Tuesday, maybe drinks are $2 off or something like that. Now, facilities are able to lower the price just for like a portion of the day. So, happy hour from 4 to 6 or something like that. It does still prohibit the unlimited sale of alcohol at a fixed price, aka bottomless drinks. That's still not legal in Indiana. But it's just something that I just also wanted to kind of flag for you all because a lot of people who were concerned about this particular bill is because alcohol is still the #1 drug of choice by youth, and by expanding kind of access to happy hours and things like that, it could encourage excessive drinking. So that was something that some advocates were certainly concerned about. Additionally, with the youth employment changes in terms of who is able to serve alcohol and things like that, there's concern too that could potentially result in an expansion of access to alcohol for young people. So we'll definitely want to pay close attention to kind of see how these policy changes are going to impact alcohol consumption and things like that. Healthcare. I think I really only had one bill that I wanted to cover regarding healthcare. I think every year, especially in this kind of like post Roe v. Wade world that we're living in, lawmakers are trying to do small steps to address reproductive healthcare access and things like that. This bill 1426 was a bill, I've seen this same bill introduced probably for the past like 3 years or so. And so it finally has crossed that finish line and is now Public Law 91. Basically what it says is that women giving birth in a hospital who are Medicaid recipients or eligible for Medicaid have the option of having a long-acting reversible subdermal contraceptive implanted after their delivery. Hospitals can be provided a religious exemption if they choose that. But ultimately, this does just expand access to contraceptives for people who are on Medicaid or are eligible for it. The author of the bill says, that any progress we make on expanding birth control access for women in Indiana is a step in the right direction. And also officials have said that because of this bill, the state of Indiana could save nearly $1.5 billion in Medicaid costs over the next 3 years. So that's certainly impactful. And, this is certainly a small step because, it's only eligible for Medicaid recipients or people who are eligible for Medicaid. But I think more and more, our hope that lawmakers will do more to address prevention of unwanted pregnancies and things like that through expansion of access to contraceptives. Higher education. We've got, I think, a couple bills for this
one. Sarah, before we jump into that, sorry, just a couple questions.
Yeah.
Do retailers need a separate license to carry out liquor?
Do retailers need a separate license to sell liquor? That, honestly, I don't know. I don't know about that. This actually, with the alcohol laws, like that was one that we were just kind of loosely paying attention to ourselves. So I don't know enough about that. But that could be a good question maybe for the Indiana Chamber of Commerce or Indy Chamber of Commerce.
And then this next question might be a good question for them too, but does that law apply to minors?
Is it for the long-acting reversible contraceptive?
I think the one before.
Oh, the one before, which was, let me see what that was. The alcoholic beverage sales. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, yeah, I mean, it's still going to be 21. You have to be 21 to be able to drink alcohol. Okay. So you're not, if you're a minor, you're not able to partake in, bottomless drink or in happy hour or anything like that still. Oh, you're asking about the contraceptive law. Thank you.
Yep. Sorry about that. And sorry.
No, that's okay. Yeah, that would be a major change if we change the drinking age. Wow. Yeah, for long-acting reversible contraceptives, I don't know that it says minors. I would definitely assume it would definitely, be for 18 and up. I don't know that it said anything specifically about anybody younger than 18. So that's something that we would definitely want to I would assume it probably did not include minors because knowing kind of our politics in Indiana and things like that, if it did include minors, this would have been a much bigger deal. So um, I would venture to guess that it's really only for people 18 and up. So, okay. So Senate Bill 48, this wasn't really a particularly controversial bill, but it's definitely one that I think is relevant just to make sure that people are aware of. It requires state educational institutions to prominently display hyperlinks to certain college scorecard information on their website and degree web pages. This is something that a lot of colleges and universities were already doing, but basically all this changed was now they need to prominently display it. This is basically a way so that students, as they choose whatever they want to major in or minor in or choose what school they go to, that they go in knowing full information in terms of like, what's the graduation rate for this particular major? What kind of money can I expect to make after I graduate with this, degree? Um, and have some of that information going into making those decisions about what path they want to take on when it comes to what they study and what schools that they go to. So this will just expand kind of access to that knowledge. Senate Bill 202 was a much more controversial bill that has passed, and I know of a lot of advocates who work in the university worlds that are still working on trying to kind of make sense of it all and to make sure that it has as little negative impact as possible. Basically, what it does is it limits and restricts the ability of public institutions to grant tenure and promotions if the higher education employees do not abide by certain conditions related to free inquiry, free expression, and intellectual diversity. So there was a lot of concern about university faculty members being censored or silenced in terms of sharing their viewpoints about particular issues, in particular political issues and things like that. I believe the author of the bill had said this is kind of a way to make students who perhaps are coming from more conservative backgrounds feel a bit more included, because there are a lot of people who believe that in universities and things like that, it's for lack of better terms, some of these universities can be too woke, and thus make students who might be more conservative to feel unwelcome there. And so these new provisions include introducing a faculty member's students to works from a variety of viewpoints and various political and or ideological frameworks related to their academic discipline. They need to make sure that they show a variety of opinions and things like that. The bill also requires faculty to refrain from subjecting students to views and opinions around matters not related to the academic discipline that they are teaching, mentoring, or in their employment role. Officials said that the law establishes a rule of faculty tenure status every 5 years. If the employee does not follow this new bill, officials said that disciplinary action, including termination, demotion, or salary reduction could occur. So a lot of critics of the bill said, in testimony against this policy, that this law would hurt recruiting a diverse faculty and students to Indiana's higher education institutions, because there's a lot of concern that professors and other faculty members of diverse backgrounds might not want to work here if they know that they're going to be censored or at risk of demotion or salary changes or things like that. So it's my understanding that universities now it's kind of left up to the universities in terms of how to interpret this and kind of implement this into their respective policies. But there is, a coalition of university faculty members that are kind of working together to kind of help make sense of it all and make sure that diverse, faculty members still feel welcome at these particular schools. So those are all the bills I wanted to cover. I'm glad I'm not talking too long because I just wanted to cover a few more items as we are looking to the 2025 legislative session. We are getting to that kind of time of year where, fall is approaching, school's about to start again. Then we've got all of the holidays and things like that. And then we really hit the ground running with the 2025 legislative session. It will be a long session as opposed to this past year. Last year was a short session. Long sessions occur in odd numbered years, and the state budget will be discussed during this long session, which is what I mentioned earlier regarding that education bill that we were talking about reading. And so because of that, the long session means that we'll be in session for probably an full extra month. First day of session, I will say they haven't posted the official date yet, but this is kind of something that I'm speculating based on previous years and things like that. It will likely start Monday, January 6th. So right after the new year, we'll just kind of hit the ground running and everything. Halftime will likely be around the beginning of March. That's when, again, all House bills that have survived the House will move over to the Senate, and likewise, Senate bills that have survived the Senate will move over to the House. That will happen likely at the beginning of March. And then sine die, which is, again, the day of adjournment, our last day of the legislature, should be around the end of April. We're also looking at seeing a lot of new faces. We are going to have a new governor this year. There's going to be a new lieutenant governor. There's going to be all sorts of new state senators and state House representatives. So that's certainly going to dictate a lot of new emerging priorities and things like that, especially with having a new governor in place. That's really, it's going to be something that we're all kind of chomping at the bit, ready to find out who this governor is going to be and how we will be able to work with that person and this new administration. With that said, I have to talk to you really quickly about, we've got elections coming up with the, new governor and everything like that. Obviously, I'm sure it comes as no surprise. Yes, there is a presidential election coming up. But I really want to drive home to all of you, but then also all of the people that you work with, that there are so many other elected officials that are going to be running for election or re-election this year that we also need to be paying attention to. So because of that, I really wanted to make sure that you all had access to McCoy's voting resources. Most of this is relevant to anybody who's in the state of Indiana, but we include information on deadlines in terms of voter registration deadlines, mail-in voting deadlines, things like that. Information on researching candidates. We're certainly not going to tell you who to vote for, but we do want you to be informed on who the candidates are and what they stand for. And I know a lot of times, we may already be decided in terms of who we want to vote for president, but do we actually know, who's running for school board or who's running for our state senate, and what do they prioritize, and do their views, are those views in line with ours? So you have information there on researching candidates. There's information on voter registration, poll worker information. That's something that I'm really trying to tell a lot more young people to do, is they can serve as a poll worker starting at the age of 16. It's an excused absence from school. You get paid too for the day. We've got a voter's guide. You can also get free stickers and magnets and things like that. So anyway, I just wanted to make sure that you had access to these resources as well. And then also I wanted to make sure that you all were aware, McCoy last year hosted for the first time Youth Day at the State House. We're hosting it again, and hopefully this will become a new regular annual event. It will be on President's Day, and I wanted to make sure that you guys can just save the date, put it in your calendar. We want to bring as many young people to the State House as possible. We don't tell them what to say. We don't tell them, it's not centered around any one particular bill or issue. We just want young people in the State House to know that they are welcome there and that they have something to say that lawmakers need to hear from them. It's going to be on President's Day, which is great because kids won't be in school that day. You can follow us for more updates. We are also so excited to partner with IYI because they are going to be hosting their 2025 State of the Child presentation that day as well. This is something, well, it's a great opportunity to find the most up-to-date data impacting, children and families, people who serve children and families every year. So IYI hosts their State of the Child presentation where they also officially will release their Kids Count data book, which I use all the time. It is like my holy grail of information when it comes to putting together my testimony, any sort of arguments for or against particular bills. Having this information, this data about children in Indiana is so important, and IYI will be there on President's Day alongside with us to release that information. So you can follow us for updates. Additionally, you can also subscribe to McCoy State House Sound Off, where I will be sending you emails directly in terms of when registration will begin for that Youth Day at the State House. Our State House Sound Off, if you don't already follow it, I would encourage you to follow it. Basically, during the legislative session, just once a week on Friday mornings, I send an email out to everybody about the bills that we're tracking that impact children, families, people who serve children and families. It's a pretty quick read. It includes links to different articles to dive deeper about particular issues. It includes calls to action if you want to take action on anything. Also information on events taking place, whether it's a rally, a committee hearing, anything like that. We try and make sure that the people that follow us through this newsletter have all the information that they need when it comes to following legislation and policy changes that impact children, families, and people who serve children and families. So definitely, I encourage you to subscribe today. It's not too many emails, I promise. I won't bombard your email with that. But yeah, that's all I have. Got about 8 minutes left, so I'm happy to take any additional questions. Again, you've got my contact information here at the bottom of the screen, sarah.comfort@mccoyyouth.org. Feel free to send me an email or reach out if there's any opportunities in the future for collaboration. I'd love to work with you. But thank you so much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah. There was at least one more question.
Okay.
The SB1 bill, will students, does it say that students must pass IREAD at second grade now? I think that's how
No. They must pass it by third grade, but they will be administered the test starting in second grade. So this is just a way to kind of start a little bit earlier so that if they haven't passed it in second grade, then those second graders can receive the proper support and everything like that so that they are prepared to pass it by third grade. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, so let's see. This one came through. What's the feeling among early childhood education advocates about increasing the match children under 12 months? Here's the question. Does that mean a provider could have 7 children under 12 months and more over 12 months?
So I will say, yeah, I don't know the predominating feeling about this change. I think there is a general kind of nervousness in terms of overworking staff and also concern that we want to make sure that children are safe and can get the proper attention that they need. I believe this really only impacts the children under 12 months. They could have more over 12 months, I believe. So I think this really only impacted the children 12 months and under.
Great.
So, yeah.
Great. Okay, so I think that is it for questions. Thank you everyone for the questions. I'm going to go ahead and take over sharing. Let's see here. Yep. Good. And then we are going to finish up. So as a reminder, a copy of the PowerPoint presentation can now be found in the chat. Aaron put a link in there. It will also be included in the follow-up email. So as we conclude, I want to thank our attendees that joined us today, as well as Sarah from McCoy. We appreciate your impact and value your voice and the choice you made to learn and partner with IYI today. Later today, you will receive an email with a link to complete an evaluation of this webinar. Please take a few minutes to let us know what you thought about today's presentation. And if you don't receive the evaluation email, check your junk as it may have been directed there. Once you complete the evaluation, you'll be redirected to your certificate of completion. And so just as we conclude, I want to give you a couple of reminders here. The first, get to the slide. The first is that we have a weekly update newsletter. It's the best way to keep in touch with us. And so if you are not on that yet, please go ahead and sign up. You can go to iyyi.org/newsletters. And then additionally, we have a couple of upcoming events that I wanted to highlight. The first is our next webinar in our monthly webinar series is August 21st. And that is incorporating youth voice into program planning, best practices and examples. That's going to be with Amelia Coffey of the Urban Institute. And then December 3rd and 4th, 2024, just a little save the date for our Kids Count conference. I'm including it in this webinar because the registration opens this Friday, July 19th, 2024. So if you are interested in attending that registration will be open. And so with that, we are going to conclude our presentation. On behalf of Indiana's youth, thank you again for showing up today and every day for Indiana's youth.